Greetings and welcome back to the No Channel. This is Bernadette Johnson. I'm also known as Keziah or Kizzy. And today I'm coming to you with another message titled The Slaughtering of the Canaanites, a Justified Genocide. Now, if you're familiar with the scriptures, particularly the so-called Old Testament of the Bible, you will know that the Canaanites were probably the number one nemesis of the Israelites. And also, if you read the scriptures, that these were the people that the Most High commanded the Israelites to pretty much eradicate when they, enter into the promised land, because the Canaanites were inhabiting the promised land. The Israelites didn't just enter into a land that was uninhabited. There were people already living there. And the Most High commanded, the Israelites, to get rid of these people, to drive them out, unalive them by the sword and all of that. But why, and it may come, as very unsettling. It may be very unsettling, especially for those of us who were brought up, in Christianity. We were taught to love your enemies, bless those that curse you, do good to those that spitefully misuse you and persecute you. See, we were programmed with that message. And then to read this in the Old Testament, the so-called Old Testament, where the Israelites were commanded to, unalive, slay, their enemies. And in this instance, Canaanites, it seems like a contradictory message. So was the Most High ordering a genocide? I mean, if you look up genocide, that would be it. Genocide is a systematic, unaliving, eradication of a people, of a particular people, of an ethnic group, of a race, of a religion. That's what genocide is. And if you read, that's pretty much what the Most High was commanding. The genocide of these Canaanites. But why? And so I just want to bring your attention to what I have, what you see on the screen here. A city by blood. Where did this come from and what does it mean, a city by blood? Okay. Actually, this comes from the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 12. And it reads, Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity. And what this means is, woe unto him that, you go into a town and invade it and unalive all the people in it, and you just take this city unjustly. You treat the people, cruelly and unjustly, and then you build your own, civilization, your own government, your own establishment on the blood of these people. And sometimes this scripture is used, even though it says town here, town, city. This can also be used in regards to a nation. Because when I read this scripture, I think about this very nation here, the United States, how it was founded on the blood of the indigenous people who lived here before the Europeans came here, the Native Americans. And we know how the Europeans treated the Native Americans over here, how they unalived a lot of them, and then gonna establish a holiday, a celebration of that slaughtering, which is Thanksgiving. Do your research on that if you don't know. And then also in other cruel and calculating, shrewd ways that they came up with to, unalive the Native Americans. They put smallpox on the blankets and gave them and distributed them to the Native Americans, gave them, what was it, to destroy the Native Americans. So when I read this verse, I think of how this very country was founded. And it's kind of strange that I'm bringing this message on the 4th of July. Now, you may be hearing it the following day, but I'm actually bringing this message on the 4th of the so-called 4th of July, which a lot of us like to call it July, because I don't celebrate it. But anyway, yeah. So when I see this verse, I think about this country and how it was founded. And if it's a country when it's built on the backs and the blood of people, and not to mention how it was built on the backs of the Israelites, or most of you would know as African Americans, the slaves. I won't even go into that, but I'm just mainly focusing on those who were originally inhabiting this the land. And of course, and if you look at the pictures of the original Native Americans, they were actually black. They just had straight hair. And some of us have Native American ancestry. So, but that's, a whole other story. But yes, so this verse in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 12, this reminds me of the United States and how it was founded. However, when I would read how the Israelites, when they came into the promised land and they went to war with the Canaanite nations that were already in the land, because it was called the land of Canaan. And in some cases, they, you know, slaughtered the Canaanites. And I was when I said, well, how is that any different from what this scripture says here? Wouldn't that be found building a town with blood? Wouldn't that be establishing a city by iniquity? And I know the Most High doesn't contradict himself. So I'm saying, but how is what the Israelites, our ancestors, did regarding the Canaanites? How is that any different from what the Europeans did to the Native Americans over here in the to the over here in the Americas? How is that any different? And I must be honest, when I would read that, I struggled with it. I struggled with trying to justify what the Israelites did. And I would read, oh, the Canaanites were wicked and the Most High wanted to, eradicate that wickedness off the land. But I mean, I just struggled with it. I struggled with trying to justify that. You just unaliving a people, slaughtering a people so brutally. And in some cases, it wasn't just the men, the warriors. In some cases, it was the women and the children too, and the livestock. And I was like, I just struggled with it. And I know, where when the Most High spoke to Abraham, he had promised him, the land of Canaan. So let's go to where, it says that in Genesis chapter 15, and we're going to read verses 18 through 21. And it says, in the same day, the Lord, or Yahuwah, made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, and the Kenizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaims, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Now these were, the land that all of these nations were, living when he made this promise to Abraham. And these are Hamitic nations. And I believe some of them, yeah. So these were Hamitic nations. But Canaanites seem to, be the main one, mentioned. But there were other nations too. And some of these were actually descendants of Canaanites also. So most of these were Hamitic nations that lived in this area of and as a child, when I would hear about Abram being promised this land, the land of Canaan, I just always thought that the land was uninhabited, that the Most High, that God, I'm saying God, led Abraham to this vacant land that where no one was living and promised him this land. So it didn't occur to me that there were people already living in this land. Now let's go to Exodus when the Most High is speaking to Moses and he told him about what he had promised Abraham. And of course, the Israelites are, Abraham's descendants, and Abraham, from his son Isaac, and then Isaac from Isaac's son Jacob. And we're the descendants of Jacob, aka Israel. Okay, so Exodus chapter 6, verses 3 and 4 reads, And I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, or the Almighty Power, but by my name, Jehovah or Yahweh or Yahuwah, was I not known to them. And I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, wherein they were strangers. So once again, we see where you know, this land was promised, from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They were all, the Most High, all, promised all of them that they would give them this land of Canaan. And why it was called the land of Canaan? It was because the Canaanites dwelled in this land. Okay, let me get a quick drink of water. Let's continue. Now we're going to go to Numbers chapter 23, and we're going to read verses 51 through 53. Now, this is where, once again, where the Most High is talking to, commanding Moses. And he says this. Now, this is where he's given a command of, what, when they get into the promised land, how they're to deal with the Canaanites and the other inhabitants that were living there. Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, when ye are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then ye shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, and destroy all their pictures, and destroy all their molten images, and quite pluck down all their high places. These are idols, because the Canaanites, they were heavy into idolatry. And we know, that's a commandment. That was a big no-no about committing idolatry. And ye shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land, and dwell therein, for I have given you the land to possess it. And once again, being commanded to drive out these Canaanites from this land because it's been given to the Israelites. Okay, let's go to Deuteronomy. And this is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 2. And when the Lord, or Yahweh, thy Elohim, or God, shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. See, these nations was actually greater than the Israelites. And when the Lord thy God, or when Yahuwah thy Elohim, shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show them mercy. Here, once again, here it is. The Most High commanding them to utterly destroy them. That's nothing but genocide. So how can, this loving Most High command his people to just wipe out another people? Let's continue. Now, this is also in Deuteronomy 7, verses 16 through 24. And thou shalt consume all the people which the Lord thy God, or Yahuwah thy Elohim, shall deliver thee. Thine eye shall have no pity upon them, neither shalt thou serve their gods, for that will be a snare unto them, so unto thee. And see, and also I just want to mention this too, and that's why the Most High didn't want the Israelites making a covenant with these Canaanites and other nations, because they would sway the Israelites to um um partake of idolatry worship and start practicing idolatry worship and worshiping these other gods besides him. Okay, let's continue. If thou shalt say in thine heart, these nations are more than I, how can I dispossess them? Thou shalt not be afraid of them, but shalt well remember when the Lord thy God, or Yahuwah thy Elohim, did unto Pharaoh and unto all Egypt the great temptations which thine eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders and the mighty hand and the stretched out arm, whereby the Lord thy God, or Yahuwah thy Elohim, brought thee out of. So shall the Lord thy God, or Yahuwah thy Elohim, do unto all the people of whom thou art afraid. Moreover, Yahuwah thy Elohim will send the hornet among them until they are left. Maybe something. So they are not. Maybe I left the word out here. Until they are not left, I believe, and hide themselves from thee. No, 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 no. Let me go back. I was reading it wrong. Moreover, the Lord thy God, or Yahuwah thy Elohim, will send the hornet among them until they that are left and hide themselves from thee be destroyed. There we go. Okay. Thou shalt not be affrighted at them. Afraid, that Friday means afraid. For Yahuwah thy Elohim is among you, a mighty God, a mighty one, and terrible. For Yahuwah thy Elohim will put out those nations before thee by little, and little. Thou mayest not consume them at once, lest the beasts of the field increase upon thee. See, this is a gradual, systematic way. But Yahuwah thy Elohim shall deliver them unto thee, and shall destroy them with a mighty destruction until they be destroyed. And he shall deliver their kings unto thy hands, and thou shalt destroy their name from under heaven. There shall no man be able to stand before thee until thou have destroyed them. So there were other ways that a lot of these Canaanites and other nations were destroyed too and driven out. It wasn't only by the sword. Like in the Most High also used like the hornet to draw them out, to drive them out. So there were other ways too that the Most High used to drive them out. So yes, this is you know, the Most High's commandment of what the Israelites would do to these Canaanite nations, and other nations too. All right, now let's go to Joshua. Now this was Moses had already died, and now Joshua is commanding he's a leader of the people, the Israelites. And now you all pretty much, I'm sure you all familiar with Jericho. The Battle of Jericho, the falling of the walls of Jericho. There's even a song, Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. So this is when the people were commanded to go walk around, march around the walls and then give a shout. And the priests blew the trumpets, the shofars, and then the walls fell. And then they came in and, destroyed the inhabitants of the city. So that's what this is about. So this is Joshua chapter 6, verses 20 through 21. So the people shouted with the priests. The people shouted when the priests blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. So there you go. This was Jericho. And in this instance, they didn't just slay the men, the warriors, the soldiers. They slew the women and the children and the old and even the livestock. So why would the Most High, why would he command the Israelites to commit such an act? And if and in today, you would think about that, you would see that as just beyond inhuman, beyond inhumane. Mean you would just that would be just unspeakably cruel if you look at it, from today's perspective. So why did he command the Israelites to, slay, to unalive these nations of people and to enter their land? He gave promised a land to Israel that was already being inhabited by a group, by nations of people, and these nations were stronger than the Israelites. But the Israelites were able to drive some of them out. Some of them, they weren't able, to drive out, and some they um made servants. So those that were living there, they were made servants. So why would he command this? All right, let's continue. Let's go back to Genesis. And this time I'm going to read Genesis chapter 14, verses 18 through 20. Now we're going to go back to Abraham. Now, I don't know if you remember the story where Abraham's nephew Lot lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. And there were some kings who went to war with Sodom and Gomorrah and took a lot of them captives, and Lot was one of the captives. So Abraham and his men of battle, went to war with these kings and delivered Lot and all the others from the hands of these kings. They won the battle. And after this victory, Abraham met with the king of Salem, Melchizedek. Now, a lot of you may be familiar with the Melchizedek, the high priest. He's called a high priest, and even they said that the Messiah was a type of the Melchizedek, and this Melchizedek was a type of the Messiah. Christians call Christ the Melchizedek. And Abraham met with Melchizedek, king of Salem. And let's just read it. And it says, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God of Yah. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of the Most High God of Yah, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High Yah, which had delivered thine enemies into thy hands. And he gave him tithes of all. Okay, so this was in Genesis where Abraham met with the Melchizedek, king of Salem. And now, actually, this same story, this verse was also mentioned in another book that's not a part of the 66 books, but it's mentioned in the book of Jasher. Now, the book of Jasher is mentioned in the 66 books. It's mentioned in the book of Joshua and in, I think, Samuel. I can't remember which one was it, whether it was Samuel 1 or Samuel 2. 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. But anyway, the book of Jasher is mentioned. Now, the book of Jasher is a bit controversial because people, some are saying that book of Jasher is a legitimate book that was taken from the Bible, and some saying it isn't. But when I see where it pretty much, is in agreement, the parts that are in agreement with the scriptures, then I give credit to that. I go along with that. So in Jasher, the book of Jasher, chapter 16, verses 11 through 12, here's what it reads. Now, this is the same account as what I just read in Genesis with Abraham meeting with the Melchizedek. But in the book of Jasher, it says, and Adonizedek. So in the book of Jasher, he's called Melchizedek, is called Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem. Now in Genesis it says Salem, but of course you see Salem here, so it's the same place. The same was Shem, went out with his men to meet Abram and his people, and bread and wine, with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech. Now, before I finish, I found it when I first read this, I found it very surprising that in the book of Jasher that it gave a name and not just a title, and it said that it was actually Shem. It was actually um he's an ancestor of Abraham. It's like Abraham was like 10 generations, the 10th descendant from Shem. So let's finish. And Adonizedek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him a tenth from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies. And Adonizedek was a priest before God, before Yah. I was, thinking, how in the world this could be Shem? When Shem, because now if you all familiar with the scriptures, Shem was one of the sons of Noah. Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or Ham, Shem, and Japheth, whichever order. So Shem lived during the time of the great flood, and he was still living to meet Abraham or Abram. So this is us the ancestry here, the ancestral line here. Abram was a direct descendant of Shem. And you would find the table of nations. You can read the table of nations in Genesis 10, where it shows the ancestry of all of Noah's sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And this shows, starts with Shem, and then all of the, his descendants, and all the way down here is Abram. And so you wonder how in the world that Shem could have still been alive when Abraham was, on the scene. Well, yeah, it's yeah. I just did a quick AI search, and I just asked, was Shem still alive during Abraham's lifetime? And it says yes, according to the biblical timeline in Genesis, Shem was not only alive during Abraham's lifetime, but he actually outlived Abraham by 35 years. Shem's lifespan, Shem lived for 600 years. Based on the genealogies in Genesis, Abraham was born when Shem was roughly 390 years old. The outcome, since Shem survived until age 600 and Abraham lived to 175, Shem was alive throughout Abraham's entire life and remained on earth after Abraham's death. This significant overlap means that Abraham could have easily learned about the events of the flood, the Tower of Babel, and earlier antediluvian histories directly from Shem. See, he could have learned this directly from Shem. And, we have to remember that back in those times, people lived a whole lot longer than they do now. Think about it. Adam lived to be 930 years old. Methuselah, which is the longest living person recorded in the Bible, lived to be 969 years old. That's almost 1,000 years old. And if Shem lived, which you can see how long, he lived in Genesis 11, verses 10 through 11, it says, these are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. So that's where they get that. That's how they get the 600 years. And these are just some websites where it talks about how Shem, lived during Abraham's lifetime. So these are just some websites you can go to. This is another one that you can go to and just read, the articles that talks about that. Now, back to the original discussion on how could the Most High command the unaliving, the wiping out of a nation of people when we know that Ordinarily, that's a monstrous act. That's a wicked act. Yah would never approve of this, the unaliving of a people like that. So we're going to go back to the original topic of discussion. I'm going to take you to another book that's not a part of the 66 books, the 66 Canaanites books, which is Jubilees. Now, this is another book that people debate about. And, some say it's not, a legitimate book, and some say it is. But as I said, if it goes along with the what's in the 66 books, then I'm going to go along with it. Now, I am going to say this, though. There are discrepancies between the book of Jasher and the book of Jubilees. And one of the discrepancies is with Esau. These two books have Esau dying two different ways. Now, we know Esau, he couldn't have died two different ways. The book of Jasher have him being unalived by, I think it was one of Jacob's sons. And this was after the death of Jacob. So in the book of Jasher, Esau actually outlives Jacob. And they were disputing over the burial of Jacob or something like that. And Esau and his, sons and his men went to battle with the Israelites. And the Israelites defeated them, and one of them, unalived Esau. Whereas in the book of Jubilees, it was actually Jacob who unalived Esau after the death of their father Isaac. Because, of course, Esau was angry with Jacob for taking the birthright and the blessing. Well, he sold the birthright for taking the blessing. And he went to war. He went to unalive Jacob. But Jacob, with this bow and arrow, he unalived Esau instead. So I want to say there are discrepancies in these two books. But I just use them to help fill in the gaps that the 66 book leaves, and to clarify, some of the things that the 66 books don't quite clarify. Okay, so let's read Jubilees 8, 10 through 12. I'm going to take another sip of water. Okay, Jubilees 8, 10 through 12. And it came to pass in the beginning of the 33rd Jubilee that they divided the earth into 3 parts for Shem and Ham and Japheth, according to the inheritance of each. Now, this is how Jubilee spells some of these names. So you will see that some of these names are spelled differently in the book of Jubilee. So I just, type it in according to how it was spelled. According to the inheritance of each, and in the first year, in the first week, when one of us who had sent was with them, and he, Noah, called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, they and their children, and they divided the earth into lots, which his 3 sons were taken into possession. And they reached forth their hands, and took the writing out of the bosom of Noah their father. And there came forth on the writings as Shem's lots, the middle of the earth. I have middle of the earth underlined for a reason. When he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons for the generations of eternity, from the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the river, from the river of Tina, and his portion goes towards the west through the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abysses, out of which this river goes forth and pours its water into the sea Maat, and this river flows into the great sea. So Noah allotted 3 of his sons sections of the earth. And when you see, a map of the people, where they live, and you will see how it is in accordance with Like you'll see where the children of Japheth live, the children of Shem live, and the children of Ham live. It is in accordance with what's in the Jubilees and how Noah allotted the land to his sons. And as I said, he allotted the land, allotted the middle of the earth to Shem. And the reason he allotted them, well, I'm gonna say the reason, but he allotted the middle of the earth to Shem. And in this area, the climate is very agreeable because it's in the middle of the earth. It's not in an area where it's too hot or too cold. And if you read more of the book of Jubilees, you will see where it says that it's in an area where it's not too hot or not too cold. So I just want to show I have a map here, the world map, and this would be the general area where that Noah gave to Shem, and it would be in the Middle East. Now I know some people don't like to use the term Middle East, but some say, oh, that's just their way of trying to separate that region from Africa. But could it be another reason why it's called the Middle East? The middle of the earth. And this would be more the middle of the earth. And also like the land, the mountain, Rapha, and different things like that. If you do research on that, it's those borders. It would be somewhere in this area. In the river of Egypt, the Nile. It would be somewhere in this area. So I just want to show you that. Okay, let's continue with in the book of Jubilees. This is Jubilees, still in Jubilees 8. This is chapter verses 17 through 21. And this portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever until his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons. And he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy. For he had said, Blessed be Yahuwah Elohim of Shem, and may Yahuwah dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is that holy of holies, and the dwelling of Yahuwah in Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places face each other. And he blessed the Elohim of Elohim, whom had put the word of Yahuwah into his mouth, and Yahuwah forevermore. And he knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever, the whole land of Eden, and the whole land of the Red Sea, and the whole land of the east and India, and on the Red Sea, and the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Caphtor, and all the mountains of Ashur in the north, and all the land of Elam, Asher, and Babel, and Shushan, and Madai, and all the mountains of Ararat, and all the region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur towards the north, a blessed and spacious land, and all that in it is very good. So yes, this was the land that was allotted to Shem. So it looks like Shem got, the best land out of the three. And as you know, Shem is where the children of Israel descended from. We're the descendants of Shem. Okay, so let's continue in Jubilees. Now this is chapter 9, verses 14 through 15. Now I know we talked about, we didn't talk about it, but you all know the passage in Genesis where it talks about Ham looking on the nakedness of his father, and then Noah cursing Canaan. Cursed be Canaan, the servant of servants shall he be. Okay, so we're getting into, Canaan and, Ham's son. So we're going to be getting into that in just a bit. So let's read Jubilees 9, 14 through 15. And thus the sons of Noah divided unto their sons in the presence of Noah their father, And he bound them all by an oath, and imprecating a curse on everyone that sought to seize a portion which had fallen to him by his lot. Now, it also talks about the land that the children of Japheth, that was, that Noah allotted children of Japheth, and that he allotted children of Ham. But for time's sake, I left that out. But if you want to read the portions that he allotted Japheth and Ham, you can read the rest of it. I'm just focusing on Shem's inheritance, because that's what we're talking about, Shem's inheritance. Let's continue. And they all said, so be it. So this was a covenant. This was an agreement. So be it. And they said, so be it. So be it for themselves and their sons forever throughout their generation, till the day of judgment, on which Yahuwah Elohim shall judge them with a sword and with fire for all the unclean wickedness of their errors, wherewith they have filled the earth with transgression and uncleanness and fornication and sin. So let's go back to this first part. So Noah and his son, they established a covenant. So if any of them will lay their hands on a portion that was not allotted to them, a curse would be put on them. And then we saw how Noah allotted that portion, that middle of the earth, to Shem. So that was Shem's land from the beginning. So how did it end up that the descendants of Canaan inhabited that land? Let's continue. This is Jubilees chapter 10, verses 28 through 34. And Ham and his sons went into the land which he was to occupy, and he acquired as his portion in the land of the south. So all the sons went into their allotted, land areas. And Canaan, now Canaan is spelled different here, but this is Canaan. And Canaan saw the land of Lebanon. This is, are you ready? We saw Lebanon before. This is Shem's portion. Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Mitzrayim, Egypt. Mitzrayim is Egypt. That was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west, that is to the sea. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward, from the border of Jordan, and from the border of the sea. And Ham his father, and Cush and Mitzrayim, Egypt, his brothers said unto him, you have settled in a land which is not yours, and which did not fall by lot to us by lot. Do not do so, for if you do so, you and your sons will fall into the land and be accursed through sedition. And by sedition ye have settled, and by sedition will your children fall, and you shall be rooted out forever. Dwell not in the dwelling of Shem, for through Shem and to his sons did it come by their lot. Cursed are you, and cursed shall you be beyond all the sons of Noah, by the curse by which we bound ourselves by an oath in the presence of the holy judge, and in the presence of Noah our father. But he, which is Canaan, did not hearken unto them, and dwell in the land of Lebanon from Hamath to the entering of Egypt or Mitzrayim, he and his sons until this day. And for this reason, that land is named Canaan. So there you have it. So it was not a case where Israelites just came in and just slaughtered and unalived and innocent people. That was Yah's judgment upon them. And when the Most High brings judgment, he doesn't do it gently. And they brought judgment, and by doing this, Canaan brought judgment upon his children. So that's why, no, none of them, none of them were spared. And then and also, so at one time, the descendants of Shem were dwelling in that land, because you saw where Shem was the king of Jerusalem. But when the Israelites entered into the promised land, Jerusalem was inhabited by the Jebusites. And actually, they were not able to drive out the Jebusites when they first entered into the promised land. When the Jebusites didn't get driven out until the time of King David, and King David drove out the Jebusites and then took possession of Jerusalem. That's when the Israelites got possession of Jerusalem. So yes, so you saw where Shem was the king of Jerusalem, the king of Salem. So yes, the land of Canaan, that middle region, it was Shem's land all the time. It was never Canaan's land to begin with. And that's why Canaan's descendants were treated. So that was Yah's judgment. Because, like I said, when Yah brings judgment, he doesn't deal gently. Just like even we ourselves, look at what we're going through and what our ancestors have gone through because of our disobedience. He didn't deal gently with us either. He actually had nations to persecute us too, even unalive us, enslave us, and then afflict us. A lot of times he uses nations as a belt on the behinds of other nations. That's how Yah moves a lot of times. He moves and he rains down judgment. He brings judgment in different ways. He may use a natural disaster. He may use sickness, disease, or plague. And he may even use other nations of people to bring judgment upon a disobedient people. And when I read this, that's when I could be at peace about the situation. This was not Yah just commanding the Israelites to just unalive and innocent people. No, these Canaanites were a wicked people, and they were on a land. They were so-called squatters on a land that was not theirs, and they brought this curse upon themselves because Noah, under divine inspiration, allotted his sons certain portions, of the land, where he allotted Ham his portion, Shem his portion, and Japheth his portion. But Canaan did not abide by that. So he was going against the Most High, and the Most High judged his descendants for it. And you think about it. What if, you go to work, or you go off on a trip somewhere, and you come back and you find someone living in your house, squatting in your house, and they're just tearing your house up. Are you going to deal gently with these people? Are you going to say, oh, well, you're welcome to stay and this and that? No! You're going to call the cops and have them thrown out. So yes, this was the Israelites was coming, came back, and these people, they were, even though they were there before, when Abraham, even during the time of Abraham, they were there. But either way, they were still, living in an area, in a region that was not allotted to them. And that's why I like reading some of the extra books, because it fills in the holes and it gives clarity to things that, to the little loose ends that the 66 books, left. So now, and when I read in the, so-called Old Testament about how the Israelites and how Yah commanded the Israelites to take out the Canaanites, I can read it with a peace of mind to know that yes, it was the reason was because they went against the oath. They broke the oath. Well, Canaan broke the oath that they made with Noah and the Most High. And because of that, judgment came upon his descendants. So I thought this was, very enlightening. And if anybody like me struggled with that, well, then here's your answer. And so I just say, hallelujah for clearing that up and resolving that for me. And I just pray that those who hear this message will be blessed and enlightened by this message. And I thank you all for listening. And please like, please share, subscribe, and leave a comment. And also, you can contact me as well. I have my, the email address. You can contact me as well if you don't want to, leave a comment for, others to see. If you want to send me a private message, you can email me. But anyway, as I said, I hope you were blessed by enlightened by this message. So anyway, until the next time, be blessed.